"Auntie, do you need a baby by chance?" To Emma, these words spoken by a dirty boy about 7 years old, dressed in unimaginably tattered rags, sounded like a gunshot. The woman froze on the spot in surprise and looked at the child. He had childishly serious gray eyes that seemed to reflect the pain of all the unfortunate and lonely, abandoned to the mercy of fate. The boy was holding an infant wrapped in a dirty, burnt-out blanket. The baby was crying hard, and the older boy was rocking him in his arms and coaxing him unknowingly. "Robert, be patient. We'll find something to feed you." Emma looked around. All the people in the market were passing fidgetily by, and no one cared about the two brothers, one of whom was a helpless infant. When the older boy approached someone and offered a brother, he was impatiently waved away. "Go away, kid. You'd better mind your own business than begging." The boy silently stepped back and walked to another, from whom he received the same response. Now he was next to Emma, who had come to the market to buy fruit and vegetables. Standing next to the counter, the woman felt someone tugging at her sleeve and uttering words that made her heart ache. Emma could not say that everything in life was easy for her. Childhood, adolescence, youth, everything was just like everyone else. Money was often scarce, but Emma didn't despair, especially when she met the affluent and charming Scott, who immediately took the girl in a turn and a couple of months after meeting him called her to marriage. It seemed to the girl, in love, that her dreams had finally come true. She met a real man who was ready for any feats and even craziness for her sake. Scott came from a good family. His parents were intellectuals. His mother worked as a doctor, his father as a university professor. In spite of their wealth, they led a fairly modest life, and Emma, who did not have such starting conditions unlike her husband, liked it very much. They often went on vacations to different places in the countryside, having picnics. Scott liked to lead an active lifestyle, and his friends held the same views. At first, her mother-in-law studied her daughter-in-law, gradually giving her all kinds of tests, but in the end, she was satisfied with her son's choice. "Scott, Emma is just a treasure. She's simple, honest, and doesn't need much, so be kind and behave like a decent man to her. These days, it's not easy to find a woman who has the time to please her husband and manage her work," a mother once said to her son. Before Scott, Emma hardly ever dated anyone. She found her fellow students too boring or clingy. The first year of married life went like a fairy tale. The husband carried his young wife in his arms, blowing the dust off of her. In return, Emma tried to do everything to make Scott feel good around her. She was an excellent cook and always met her husband with a hot, fresh dinner. On holidays and weekends, she spoiled him with something unusual from foreign cuisine and baked goods. Scott's friends were delighted when they visited the newlyweds. There was perfect order everywhere, and the table was overflowing with treats. "When do you have the time to do everything?" they said to Emma, who only smiled shyly. "It's not hard for me. The main thing is that we both have a good time together." Scott smiled as he supported his wife, and after the guests left, he kissed his wife affectionately and thanked her for being such a great hostess. However, as time passed, a pensive expression began to appear on the man's face, which made Emma feel uneasy. Knowing that guessing at other people's feelings is a thankless task, the woman decided to ask her husband directly what was bothering him. Scott didn't take a hint and asked straight out, "Did you have an abortion before you got married?" "Of course not." Emma was even offended, because he was and still was her first and only man, and he had been her first man since her marriage. "Why do you say that?" wondered Emma. "You and I have been married for more than a year, but so far you haven't gotten pregnant. I've heard that happens to women who have had an abortion on their first pregnancy," Scott said. "Are you saying that you got me as a whore girl?" Wife's eyes appeared. "How could you even think that, let alone say it? How do you feel about me?" It was the first serious quarrel between the spouses. Emma cried into her pillow half the night, replaying her husband's hurtful words in her head. Scott apologized in the morning, but suggested, "Let's both of us get tested, just in case I'm the problem." Emma saw that it was extremely difficult and unpleasant for him to say such words, but was grateful to her husband for not laying all the blame on her. Soon the results of the examination showed an unpleasant picture for the woman. She had problems with her hormones, plus a lot of inflammatory diseases. The doctor was even sympathetic. With diagnoses like yours, it's easier to adopt than to try to get pregnant. Maybe you shouldn't torture yourself so much. No, I'm going to try though. I want to have our long-awaited baby, and I'm willing to go through all the therapies, Emma jumped in. Getting pregnant and having a child with the man she loved became a kind of obsession for her, which she had been trying to realize for 10 years. However, the miracle did not happen. Tired of such a childless life, Scott found himself a mistress who soon became pregnant by him. Then the man put his wife before the fact. Let's not waste our time, Emma. You can't have children, and I'm going to be a father soon. I want a divorce. I want to raise my child in a normal, full family. Understand me and forgive me. I honestly waited for you to heal, but it didn't happen. So let's go off the past and live our own lives. Husband shrugged. So Emma was left alone. She left the apartment to her husband and moved into her old 2-room apartment on the outskirts of the city, which had once been given to her by her mother, but her husband did not want to live there. Emma renovated the apartment and stayed there. During her absence, the neighborhood had been completed, and many different buildings and institutions had sprung up. Now it was impossible to say that the neighborhood was no good in terms of amenities, but that did not make it any easier for Emma. She was left alone with the unfulfilled dream of having a child of her own. Even after her divorce, she continued to receive treatment for infertility, hoping to give birth at least for herself, as some of her acquaintances did. All the long years while she was receiving treatment, Emma thought only about one thing: how her life would be if she could get pregnant and give birth to her husband a long-awaited heir. Scott had done well in the divorce. His second wife bore him 2 sons. The thought of going to an orphanage and adopting one of the abandoned children increasingly haunted her. Emma was ready to take the decisive step, but then she met 2 brothers. Bending slightly and leaning forward, the woman pointed her eyes at the crying baby and asked, "Is that your little brother? Why is he crying so hard?" "He's hungry," answered the boy, in a matter-of-fact way. "Mom's gone. She hasn't been home for days, and Robert has nothing to eat. At least I can eat a piece of bread or pasta, but he can't." "Where's your daddy?" Emma struggled to hold back tears. "I don't know. I don't remember him," answered the boy, rocking the baby, and suddenly offered, "Auntie, take him to your place. He's small. He doesn't need much. Just give him some milk, and he'll sleep for half a day. Robert is quiet, not fussy. He is only 5 months old. Take him." Emma didn't immediately know what to answer. She knew she had to do something to help the unfortunate children. But how? An inner voice whispered to her, "Don't refuse. Their own mother doesn't need them. Take the boys. They will either stay on the street and die, or they will be put in an orphanage, and what will happen to them there? How do you know?" "Where's your mother? She won't be happy if some strange woman from the market like me takes her boys." Emma tried to turn the conversation into a joke. "What about Mama?" The boy shrugged. "She'll only be glad if Robert is taken away. He's screaming all the time because he's hungry, and Mama doesn't want to take care of him. Our neighbor said that with such a mother we will be taken away anyway, and I'm afraid, if they really take him away, I won't see him anymore, will we? That's what the neighbor said." Tears came to the boy's face. "It's not true that they'll send us to different orphanages, is it?" "Let's not look that far ahead," Emma suggested. She had already made up her mind, but she wanted to make sure of something. "Where do you live? I think I need to see your mother anyway. Ask her permission, and if she says she's okay with it, then I'll not only take your little brother, but you too. What do you say?" "Let me take you to our house, then, in case Mom's already here." The tears in the boy's eyes dried up as he walked briskly forward. Emma was carrying a crying baby in her arms, who, exhausted from tears and hunger, whimpered softly. He smelled of sour milk, dirty rags, and an unwashed body. The typical smell of children from such families. Emma thought with anger and pity. The woman followed her little guide and soon found herself in the private sector, which was full of small, unattractive houses. Most of them had crooked walls and dilapidated fences. Although most of the houses had large plots, Emma could see nothing that looked like a vegetable garden. The grass was everywhere, reaching 2 or more meters high in some places. As the boy stopped in front of a low, broken-down fence, a scream came from a house with a half-open door. "Steve, where are you? Where's my mug?" "It's for me." The boy shuddered and ran into the house. After a moment, Emma heard the boy say, "Mommy, here's your mug. It was on the table, and you didn't see it." "Mama's sick, and you're too lazy to hand me my mug. Where have you been, you scumbag?" The woman's voice had a hysterical, drunken tone to it. Emma couldn't stand it and entered the house, still holding the infant in her arms. She could hardly contain a cry of indignation when she saw what was going on in the house. The scale of the place was astounding in its despair and untidiness. It was impossible to tell the color of the floor because of the thick layer of dirt that covered it and the abandoned carpet. The same was true of the curtains, the drapes, the greasy tablecloth, the sofa cover, and the armchairs. Judging by the appearance of the furniture, it was brought back in the 1980s. The stove was cluttered with dirty dishes. Everywhere in the kitchen there were plastic packages of instant food, empty beer and vodka bottles. A moldy piece of bread, covered with flies, was lying on the floor beside the filthy black sink. The stench in the house was incredible. Emma almost clutched her nose at the deafening combination of scents that she'd never encountered before. "Who's that?" the landlady asked in a drunken voice, pointing her finger in Emma's direction. The woman's face was puffy, as if she'd been drinking for days. "I guess so," the guest thought, watching her hostess awkwardly try to make herself look mysterious. "It's—" Little Steve fell silent, not knowing what to say next. Emma decided to help him out. "Hello. I wanted to meet with you to discuss an important matter. Can you give me a moment of your free time now?" "Why not? I can do that," the woman answered bravely and hiccuped. Then an understanding expression appeared on her face. "I'd talk, but I'm not very comfortable right now, you know?" She smirked. "I'm, if I may say so, a little out of dialogue." "I see," Emma replied reservedly. "Maybe you need some medicine." The lady immediately grasped the essence of what was said. Yes, the medicine won't hurt at all. Steve, be a friend and go get the medicine for Mom. You know what I mean, don't you?" But then she made a pouty face. "I don't have any money for medicine. What are we going to do?" "I have something," Emma replied, overcome with disgust. She went into the kitchen and pulled out a bag of ground black coffee. She struggled to find a clean pot, a metal ladle with a handle. She brewed the coffee and made Steve's mother drink a full mug. The woman's gaze became more meaningful, but it was also filled with sadness. "And why are you giving me your coffee here?" the landlady asked, trying in vain to create a semblance of order. Then she turned her attention to the baby, who had fallen asleep, and she shouted at her eldest son, "Steve, get Robert to bed now. Why is he lying here?" "Please don't shout," Emma asked, barely able to control the urge to punch the hungover lady. "The baby is sleeping. Don't wake him up with your shouting. I think he's lost his strength from the constant hunger." A look of remorse or pity, most likely for herself, appeared on the woman's face. "Yes, I always have him hungry. You see what conditions we have to live in. It's all the state's fault. They don't want to give me money or work. What money do I have to survive on if I don't even get an allowance?" Emma had to sit in silence for a few minutes while the woman poured out her dissatisfaction. This was not the first time Emma had encountered such people who had everyone else's fault, everyone else's, but not theirs. "Well, to what do I owe?" the hostess muttered, looking at Emma studyingly. "I see the conditions in which you live, and frankly, I don't give a damn," the guest replied with a sudden harshness. "I'm more concerned about what happens to your children. Are you aware that they can be taken away from you? You will lose your parental rights when your children are taken to the orphanage." "So what if they do?" Then I'll feel better, the woman replied nonchalantly. Don't you feel sorry for them? Emma tried to press her conscience, but she didn't care. Will anyone take pity on me? It's good for you. You're dressed decently. You're doing well in life. But what about me? There was a picture of indignation on the hostess's face. I look bad now, but in my youth I was such a beauty that couldn't even dream of. So many men were chasing me. Everyone was trying to persuade me to get married. But I was proud. I didn't want to marry just anyone, so I got married on my own head. My first husband turned out to be a scoundrel. As soon as he found out I was pregnant, he started running around with mistresses. He wouldn't give me any money, started hitting me, and one day he just took off. And then I got the divorce decree in the mail. Can you imagine what it was like for me then? I had just given birth, and I was left alone, with a baby in my arms. I was working at the hospital as a nurse, and Steve was small and sick a lot. Because of this, I could not go to work several times. I had no one to leave him with. In general, I was asked, as they say in good faith, to write a letter of resignation. I did, and when I came home I felt so sad that words can't express it. I looked in the fridge, and there was cold vodka. I thought I would drink a little and forget about my problems. I got so drunk that I forgot my own name, and did not notice how I began to drink, more and more each time. Next, Emma, who chose not to interrupt her companion, learned that the woman had not been able to find another job for several years. She barely had enough money for basic necessities until she was offered a job as a janitor. As a janitor, she easily found company for a pleasant pastime. So pleasant that after another drinking spree she found out that she was expecting her second child, whose father she did not even know, because that day she was drunk out of her mind, and who was with her she simply did not remember. That's how I live, summed up the hostess. And why do you care about my children? What do you care about them? Such as I want to take them, replied Emma nonchalantly. The hostess surprised her with an indifferent shrug. She nodded. Well, if that's what you want, then take it. Just both of them. Yes, both of them, the guest replied firmly. The woman hesitated. You do understand that I can't just give your kids away, don't you? After all, they are my blood. What can you give for them? Exactly how much? I'll need money, so I'll have something to pour out my grief with, because I'll be alone. Emma was surprised at the woman's resourcefulness, though there was nothing to be surprised about. Even in this situation, she was trying to get the maximum benefit for herself. The state would take the children for nothing, without paying anything, and this way she has a chance of making a good profit. After thinking, Emma nodded and said, All right, I'll find the money, but I'll need you to officially sign a waiver, because I don't want any surprises in the form of remorse. Afraid I'll blackmail you? The woman smirked. You should ask my kids, at least the older one. He's smart. He understands everything, even though he doesn't go to school. Steve! She shouted deafeningly. When the boy appeared, the woman pointed her finger at her guest, abashedly, and asked, This aunt says that she wants to take you away. Will you go with her? Yes, the son replied hesitantly, if you let me go. Why should I keep you when I have nothing to live for? The landlady said. Tell you what, I don't have that kind of money on me. I'll bring it back in 2 days. In that time, you will prepare a waiver from the children. I'll take it and the children when you're ready. I'll leave you some money I have with me as a deposit, okay? Emma placed a bill on the table, at the sight of which the hostess's eyes greedily lit up. Write a receipt that you received so much money from me, Emma asked her, and the hostess silently wrote the receipt. Pleasure doing business with you, the hostess bowed as she escorted Emma to the exit. On the threshold, the guest turned around and turned to Steve. I'll take you both. Do you mind? We'll live together. I have plenty of room, and you'll go to school, and Robert, when he gets older, we'll send him to kindergarten. Will you wait for me? Yes, I will wait for you, unbelieving his happiness, whispered the little boy. When Emma returned home, she lay awake half the night, imagining poor Robert crying in the dark and asking for food. The bad mother, after getting the money, still bothered to buy the baby milk and fed him plenty for the first time ever. As Steve said, the baby slept through dinner. He was full, which had never happened before since he was born. Emma returned, as promised, 2 days later, with the rest of the money already. She wasn't going to give up her chance to be a mother. It was better than leaving the children to their fate and the mood of a drinking mother who might not know what to do with them. The boy's mother greeted her as her best friend, putting the house in minor order. However, Emma had little interest in what exactly she had done. After all the future mother's thoughts were focused on the fact that soon she would be called a mother and that she would finally realize her dream. 3 years had passed since that day. Emma confidently drove the car with her 2 sons, Steve and Robert, who needed a ride to kindergarten. The boy looked nothing like the little crying baby that she had first seen. Robert's cheeks were rounded, radiating health. Steve held himself with the nonchalant superiority of an older brother. "Robert, you're not holding the pen right. Mom, when are you going to teach him to write? Maybe I should do it myself," Steve said with a smile. "That's not a bad idea. You'd be great," his mother winked at him. She was amused and touched by the fact that Steve always tried to look after his younger brother, who tried to imitate him in everything. Even their clothes and haircuts were the same. When her ex-husband, Scott, first confronted Emma after she became the mother of 2 adopted children, the man's surprise was boundless. "Emma, do you have children? Have you decided to adopt someone?" "What's the big deal?" the ex-wife replied as if nothing had happened. "I've always dreamed of having children. Now I have them. You should be happy for me and our friendly family." Scott hesitantly congratulated her and walked away, thinking that fate is sometimes full of surprises.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. "I will do my best." Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. "Did you not hear what I said?" "I'm sorry." I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look, "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day." Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. "So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.